Welcome to the Spirit of a Badass, where we celebrate stories of courage, hope, and resiliency. I'm your host, Alecia Jacobson.
Hello and welcome to today's episode. Thank you so much for being here. This episode, first of all, let me just say literally every single time I say I'm super excited, I get super excited about things. So that is very, very genuine. But today we are going to talk about something that I know very little about. I have a friend who has kind of dabbled in what our topic is today. And I have talked about it with some of my clients just to say, hey, here's an option. I know nothing about it, but you can explore it. And I think it's a topic that a lot of people can benefit from, at least kind of opening your eyes to, oh, this is much different than what I thought. So I'm excited. And we're talking, just to kind of tease you there, we're talking about microdosing. And I think so many things out there that are accessible and supportive of us. It's sort of like they're behind this curtain of our ideas of what it was once, or just when you don't have the information, you can't make informed decisions. So my goal here is to be uncomfortable and have conversations where I'm like, I don't know shit, but I think this can be helpful. So anyway, that is where we are going today. My guest today is Kayse Gehret, with nearly 3 decades in the healing arts, is an engaging, accessible founder of Microdosing for Healing. Her program is an international virtual platform combining microdosing education and supportive community. The interactive group programs offer a unique, intimate community of individuals drawn to practice with diverse intentions, including physical healing, mental wellness, emotional balance, and spiritual connection. Unlike pharmaceutical medications, natural plant medicines help us heal at the root cause and show tremendous potential for healing of PTSD, trauma, adverse childhood experiences, depression, and anxiety. The intention of the program is to introduce individuals to the beautiful practice of microdosing earth medicines, inspire a lifelong connection to nature, instill reverence and respect for the medicines, and create the conditions for healing inside a welcoming and supportive container. Welcome, Kayse.
Hi, best intro ever. I love it.
I mean, I remember. So I say this because my friend that was telling me about this kind of idea, I was like, whoa. I just remember back in high school, this is completely different. I don't know how, but I know that you know how, and I know that it is different, but I think that other people also don't have this information. So let's start. Just tell us a little bit about who you are, how you came to be practicing in this space, and a little bit about your journey.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, first of all. Yeah, I mean, I was you and like most of your audience. So I was an 80s kid, and so grew up like at the heavy, heavy stigma coming out of the 80s and 90s. And I also had a grand mal seizure disorder that I developed as a teenager. So I was always really wary about psychedelics and drugs in general. But when I came across the concept of microdosing, which is subperceptual, almost like supplementation, where it's subperceptual, you're not feeling the altered effects of psychedelics, that intrigued me. And I had a foundation of several decades of healing arts practice. I'd studied a lot of things. I'd tried a lot of things. And so its subperceptual nature and the subtlety of it led me to grow curious and start to read about it at the time, talk to the few people I could find that were doing the work at the time. And as soon as I began microdosing, not only did my seizures cease immediately, and I had extreme nervous system healing, I also received a whole host of other benefits in the mental, emotional, spiritual realms, creativity realms, intuitive realms. So I can't say enough good things. It's been the most meaningful healing practice I have personally done in my life. And I love working with beginners who have wariness, have stigma, are careful and cautious about how they're coming to practices, because that was exactly me.
Yeah. Did you start this journey because of your seizures or?
No. And actually, I think if I had talked to anybody or had asked anybody, people would have warned me against it. And so I'm really happy that there wasn't a lot of information out there at the time, because I probably would have been contraindicated against trying it. I think I was just curious, and it was subperceptual, and I'll try it, and was for healing and well-being. And I greatly underestimated the potential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
Oh gosh, I started, it was before the pandemic.
Okay, so you were curious and you started with this. Now you said subperceptual. Is it my saying? What does that mean?
We used subperceptual to mean you're not going to be tripping. You're not going to be distorted. You're not going to be seeing visual distortion, but you are going to feel effects. So there's really no perfect word for it, because you are going to feel different once you start microdosing. Very sure. But you're just not going to be feeling kind of the drug effects of it.
Okay. That's so interesting, because that's, I bet, a huge barrier. I mean, especially like for someone like me, I was just having, I think, was I telling my son last night that I was meeting with you today and having you on? Or no, maybe it was somebody else. Anyway, I have these conversations a lot. And that's one of my fears, is that I don't want to feel high, or I don't want to feel not in control isn't the word, but I don't like to feel that altered, essentially, like in a I'm out of control type of way.
Yes, that's most of the people I work with. I work with a lot of parents. I work with a lot of people who have a lot of responsibility in their careers. And they're like, I can't be weird. I can't be off. I can't be out of it. And it's really fun to witness, because within a few days of practice, they realize, like, not only are they not distorted, they're actually better versions of themselves than they are normally. So it's a lot of the stigma, especially with mushrooms, is it makes you feel the opposite of what the stigma is. You know, we think of like stoner and trippy and being out of it, but microdosing actually makes you clearer. It makes you sharper. It improves your reflexes. You're just better in most ways.
Okay. All right. So I know nothing. Tell me as if I am somebody that's, we're having a call, or however you start with somebody, to inform and give us how this works, what's the process like, all of the things.
So much to this, but I think what's important for people to realize, it's the opposite of, say, a pharmaceutical medication, where a pharmaceutical medication is having an effect on you that stops and starts with you taking that drug, right? Mushrooms reveal you. And so it helps you heal your innate healing potential. So a great example is my seizures. Like when I noticed I started microdosing and I didn't have seizures, or I didn't have an aura for a few months, and I was like, I wonder if this is going to keep going, right? Is this going to last? And then I got really curious when it was time to take a break from microdosing. I was like, I wonder if my seizures are going to come back once I stop taking the mushrooms. And they never did. And that's when I realized, okay, everything that you heal with mushrooms sticks with you. So it's not actually the mushrooms doing something to you. It's more so the mushrooms potentiate something within you to heal in a very lasting way, which is so counter than our conditioning of reaching for an external substance.
That's a really interesting piece of it. How does that work?
On the body?
Yeah.
So mentally, it has really profound nervous system implications and brain cognitive function benefits, because the active substance in psilocybin mushrooms quiets, we call the default mode network of our brain. So it's that part of our brain that recognizes patterns. And so we get up, we do the same thing over and over and over again, as humans do, especially in modern society. And it increases as we age, right? Our rigidity and our fixedness. What psilocybin does, it kind of creates all these new neural connections and opening. So it gives us an opportunity to develop new ways of thinking, get out of ruminating thoughts. And so that's why it's so helpful to addictions, to anxiety, to depression. all of these things are tied to the rigidity of our minds, especially as we age, to kind of open up our minds to new connections. So there was just a great article in the New York Times of science studies of the brain on psilocybin. And it's just, yeah, it's night and day difference in terms of like the connections your brain can make.
You said addiction. Do you work with a lot of people that have addiction of all sorts of different addictions?
Yes. And there's a broad range of addiction. There's the ones we hear a lot about, but there's also, all of us as humans, I think, tend to fall into our patterns and fall into our external things outside of ourselves. And what mushrooms help you do is really to come into yourself, and you are less, you need less external stimulus from outside yourself across all things. And so whether it's eating disorders or alcohol addiction or exercise addiction, sometimes anything that you're doing in a repetitive, ruminating way, it's reparative to that mindset.
Damn. So what do people, I mean, they come to you with this. Do they know that that's why they're coming to you?
People come for all kinds of reasons. So when I first started in 2020, most people came, it was still during lockdown. So a lot of people were having mental health challenges. Lots of people were like leaning on the alcohol a little too heavily to get through the pandemic, they said. And it was more so mental health challenges at the start. Now I see it equally spread across mental health reasons, physical health, lots of headaches, migraines, PMDD, nervous system dysregulation, also spiritual discovery. I'm starting to see more and more people. Yeah, people really want to tap into their personal growth and their emotional regulation and build resiliency.
They reach out to you, then what?
Mm-hmm. So a few years ago, the problem was people had no information. They were like, tell me I know nothing, like tell me about it. Now, a lot of times people come having done a little bit of their own research on the Google, and there's almost too much information and there's too many opinions and too many voices. So lots of times now it's people want to know kind of what's true, what's false, is this true? And so a lot of times my first conversation with people is just really talking about what's going on with you in your life right now, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Where are you at? How are you feeling? And then we kind of talk about, is microdosing and mushrooms specifically going to be supportive for what you're looking for and what you can kind of expect from the process? There's a lot of misinformation right now in terms of pharmaceutical contraindications. Like people think that if they're on an antidepressant, they can't start microdosing, which is not true. That's a prevalent one I hear. And there's a lot of contraindications that are, if people do research on high dose psychedelic therapy, that are contraindications that aren't necessarily contraindications for microdosing, seizures being one of them.
Yeah. Okay. So you have that sort of meeting with them. They say, yes, I want to do this. Then what happens? Because I'm thinking, where does it come from? How do I get this? Yep. What do I do with it? What is this all like?
Yeah. So the easiest and most accessible way is to grow your own medicines. Mushrooms are unique in that they're very easy to grow. They're very prolific once you get the hang of it. And they need a very small amount of space, kind of the size of a shoebox. And there's we have a cultivation collaborator who makes cultivation kits. So people can get the kit for themselves and then they order their spores. And we support in the guidance in cultivation process. There are also a lot more options in terms of medicine makers and cultivators out there too, that we have collaborative relationships with so that people know where they're getting their mushrooms from and their sourcing is clean and organic.
Wow. Okay. So there's people that's just growing in their house? Where?
Mm-hmm. So it's this, the cultivation kits are the size of a large shoebox and they love dry and dark conditions. And so a lot of people just have them in a closet. Some of our engineers make special rooms for them.
Oh, I like that. And I believe that too. Yes. So much. Okay. So I'm blown away here. So I can buy a kit and then how long does that take? So I have everything. how long, what's that look like? How long does it take to grow?
So there's the technical answer and then there's the real answer, which I'll share the real answer. So most times when people are growing, it takes like 3 to 4 months, I would say on average, to get the hang of it. It's just like anything, there's a little bit of a learning curve at the start to get it going. And then once you kind of get going and you know what you're doing, you almost have more mushrooms than you know what to do with. Often becomes a problem over time. So it's sweet. It's kind of like growing your own herb garden or having your own garden in your yard that you can source your food from. So a lot of people enjoy that. And then sometimes people just don't have, I've worked with a lot of people who travel a lot, who have lots of kids and pets, and they're like, I can't take on a hobby right now. So in that case, it's totally fine to work with one of our medicine partners who does make finished medicines in the form often of tinctures or capsules or tablets, some kind of finished form of medicines.
Oh, okay. So not at all what my mind, this is why I have you here, because in my mind, I'm getting a baggie in the mail, probably rolled up. I'm like, how am I getting this? Tinctures. Wow.
Yes. So I really encourage people with sourcing. I always tell people it's kind of like food. Like imagine the difference between eating strawberries you grew it from your yard or you got at the farmer's market versus strawberries from like a big box mass supermarket. Night and day, right? Like completely different vibration. That's similar to mushrooms. Like they're organic, they're sentient beings, they have a living energy. So you don't want to buy them from a gas station. So it's worth taking the time to, people are always like, well, how do I find high integrity, quality products? And it's really just stepping into this world and meeting people and talking to people. And I really encourage people, like, know your farmer. So even if you're not growing your medicine, most people who I work with tend to know each other.
Okay. So word of mouth, and somebody who I trust you. So I'm going to trust who you refer me to. And please don't buy this at the gas station. I feel like that. Yeah. Don't do that. Don't do that. All right. So then what? How would I begin this? What does it look like day after day?
In practice. So over time, we've experimented a lot with this. Most people really thrive with a protocol to start out with. And I recommend that, not that you have to do it, but I think it just suits our little human to human minds. We thrive with structure. Just like when we're learning any new habit, it's nice to do it in the same way with consistency, at least the first 6 weeks. And so usually with people, depending on where they're at, what they're working on, I'll recommend a certain dosage and I'll recommend a certain protocol in that sometimes they do every other day. Sometimes they'll do consistent days. So maybe a 4-day on, 3 days off, 5 days on, 2 days off. And I really listen to the person, kind of the totality of what's going on in their life, what their intentions are, and that'll help guide me. Ultimately, it's kind of like yoga or meditation. After you do it consistently for so long, you don't need to do it every day, right? It's just kind of you're living that life. It's just with you all the time. And so when you're first starting a meditation practice, if you do it every day for the same amount of time, around the same time each day for 6 months, then when you don't meditate a day, you're just kind of in that. You can kind of tap into that zone more easily. That's exactly how microdosing is too. So most people in my community, they'll start off with 6 weeks. Sometimes they'll practice up to 3 months. Then they'll take a break. And sometimes a break will be a month. And sometimes people will take off 6 months. But when you come back to microdosing, it's always something different to work with. Every strain is different. Every harvest is different. Each medicine is slightly different. And so I have a lot of people now who are been in our community for 4 years now that started off maybe with, I want to get off alcohol, drink less wine. And now, 3 years later, they're working on completely different intentions now. I always encourage people, try not to think of this as a drug or a supplement. Think of it as a relationship. So some relationships are kind of you meet and you're off to the races. And it's this is my soulmate and we're off and it's just you're together. Other people need more of a warm up with the medicine. And so you'll practice for a few weeks and you'll really kind of start to click in week 5, 6, 7. Other people, especially people who are on antidepressants, a lot of the antidepressants have a blunting effect on the same receptor. So the mushrooms are trying to attach and they can't fully do so because of the blunting effect. Sometimes those people, it just takes longer. So it's not that they can't do it. It's just can be a little frustrating for them because it takes longer to get the same effects that someone else might get early on. But I've seen many, many people. I like to set expectations that there can be a range, but I've seen many, many, many people who have had near instantaneous results, like within the first week of practice. I'm working with one woman now as a great example. She had extreme anxiety when driving. Like she could drive
me.
So she's like, I'm fine on like back roads and country roads, but she's like, put me on a freeway and I'm like freaking out. She, after a week of practice, she was like, it's crazy. I can just drive anywhere now. I don't have to go like an hour out of my way to get places because, so it can be really, really fast, especially when it is these underlying nervous system conditions.
Yeah. I mean, me personally, over the last year, I've been kind of playing around with healing my nervous system, and probably I'm not doing anything too consistently, but I'm trying. And that's so interesting. That is mine. It is anything new on a road, or like yesterday I had to drive on the interstate and the over 55 miles an hour. And the entire time I'm thinking I'm going to die, or weather while driving. And these are things like I joke about it because it's really, really fucking crazy. Like I feel nuts in my mind driving thinking, oh, I'm going to die. And I see accidents in my head. I'm like, girl, you're going to like manifest this, like calm down. Like you don't need to be visualizing these semis jackknifed in front of you. Just drive. It's normal. But yes, that's, right. And then a week later, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of us, I hear so many people describe things, what you just did, and manifest in all different ways. Because I think our nervous systems from overstimulation, the media, it's unending. And our bodies are not designed to take in that much input, right? And so our nervous systems are so maxed out already that it doesn't take any, it just takes any little change more to really push us over the edge. And so one of the things I think fundamentally mushrooms are doing is they are helping get us back in our animal bodies almost. Like they're reigniting our instinct, our resilience, our intuition, and helping remediate a lot of that overstimulation that we get. And getting rid of the static, like so much of the static that we feel and anxiety that we feel is really due to things external to ourselves and not innate in us. That's why so many people take anti-anxiety meds and ADHD meds and they don't really have an effect. They don't help. Most of the times people go, I guess I could feel worse. I definitely don't feel better from them, but I guess I could feel worse. And it's really, it's really, really learning to reset your nervous system and reset your energy body to a new way to help you navigate life with more resilience.
Yeah. Do you recommend this in partner with other modalities like meditation or yoga, things like that?
100%. Yes. I think it's really designed and meant to be paired with these things. Yeah. I think I work with a lot of other microdosing guides and coaches, and it's beautiful in that each of them holds microdosing practice in their unique background. So some are health and fitness coaches, some are psychotherapists. So there's so many different ways to hold the work and pair it with different practices. So from breath work to Qigong and martial arts to meditation to photography to artistic expression and practices. There's so many beautiful pairings that I've seen over the last 4 years.
Yeah. So they're taking their passion or whatever they're excited about and then pairing it with this. So what does it look like for you then? What do you pair it with?
It's different for each individual. Sometimes it's things that they were not expecting. One of the things we hear about often is meditation and journaling. And a lot of people really, really thrive with those things. But I've also seen people really tap into things that they never would have been drawn to if it wasn't the medicine kind of leading them to it. So one that I've seen commonly that I just love so much is dance. A lot of people are drawn to, and they're like, oh my gosh, I used to dance. When I was younger, I used to dance and I used to really love it, but I haven't done it for years. And so they're drawn to like start dancing again, even if it's just like dance parties of one in the morning. So people really moving their body and reconnecting with dance, which we have been doing since ancient times. Another one is drumming. I have a lot of male clients who really love drumming. And they're like, I would have never discovered this, but there's something about that rhythmic movement that's deeply meditative and deeply healing for people. Breath work too is a really powerful one. And I also have worked with a lot of tapping coaches too, which is another beautiful pairing practice. So it's what I tell people, if you just microdose by itself, it's very likely you're going to feel great effects. But if you really want to get the most out of the practice, it's when you're opening your mind, it's ideal to pair it with things that are going to introduce new lifestyle practices. It's like a domino effect. So one example is our community will be on the Zoom together and people will go after 6 months or a year. They're like, did anybody else lose weight? Like, I've lost a lot of weight. Like, we can't see you from the neck down, but did anybody lose weight? And everybody goes, yeah, I lost 10 pounds, 20 pounds. And it's not so much that microdosing causes you to lose weight. It's just microdosing makes you feel more relaxed. And when you feel more relaxed, you sleep better. And when you sleep better, you eat better. When you eat better, you exercise more. And so it's this beautiful cascade that happens. One thing leads to the next to the next. And so it's nice to kind of harness that new opening and that new neuroplasticity of your mind by kind of pairing it with new habits.
That's so interesting. And if you look at the addiction piece of it, a lot of times people are eating as a form of self-soothing. And if their nervous system is feeling better, that might be something that they're not doing anymore either. Dang, like this just, I mean, truly, this just seems really, really neat and expansive. And I do acupuncture, and I started acupuncture because of my anxiety, specifically with driving. It was bad, bad, bad. And I have been reluctant, and I think maybe I did like 25, 30 years ago, but to go on like an anti-anxiety because I've been afraid it would take bits of me away, like my edgier parts. And I worry about losing those edgy parts. Could you speak to that a little bit? Does it make sense what I'm saying?
It does. It does. I think a lot of times people have an experience with like cannabis, for example, and they're like, it just makes me too chill. Like, I don't want to lose my game. Like, I want to do this and I want to get the benefits, but I don't want to be out of it. And I don't want to be so calm that I'm just not who I am. Mushrooms are the opposite. Like, mushrooms make you who you are more than any other practice I have ever done. So if there is an edge to it, I think it quickly becomes apparent, like the friction between who you are and kind of the architecture of your life. And if things are out of alignment, it's going to become apparent really quickly. And so that's part of having a coach, having a guide, having a therapist, and community to support you and reflect as you become, because it can happen very, very quickly sometimes. So yeah, it doesn't dull you. It's the opposite. It shines you up.
You said if you're out of alignment, it's apparent. Give us some examples of what that looks like in practice.
So, yes. Oh gosh, so many. So I think sometimes people come and at the start they'll say something like, I'm afraid of changing, or my partner is afraid that I'll change. And I'm like, well, you're going to. You're going to. So it requires a level of trust, I think, in the process. And this is something I'm really seeing people grow into. Like, people coming now to practice are so ready, like so spiritually ready. I can feel it in them from the start. They're like, I don't know where I'm going, but I don't want to live the next 40 years kind of where I've been spiritually or emotionally. Like, I know there's more to this whole thing going on. And so they're ready for it. So lots of time people come and they're like, I know I'm not living where I'm meant to live. Like, I moved here for a guy, or I moved here for a job, and I've never really loved it here. I've never really vibed here. So a lot of times people start practice and like 6 months or a year later, they're living in a different part of the country, in a different environment and energy altogether. So relationships can change, environments can change. Lots and lots of people who've been in jobs that they're like, it's safe, it's a paycheck, I get insurance, right? They're like, it's not fulfilling, it's not, does my heart sing doing what I'm doing? No. They sometimes very, very quickly go, this is becoming so intolerable. Like it pushes them to kind of make these changes in their life.
Yeah, because they're falling into alignment. And then everything, the contrast is so much brighter.
Yeah, it's the most incredible work I have ever done. And I've studied and held space for lots of different modalities. I think microdosing in 10, 20 years will kind of be like yoga today. Like it was so fringy just a short time ago. And now there's like yoga studios everywhere in the country. I think as we normalize reconnecting with earth and natural medicines and focus more on our food and our environment and our water and the power of sunlight again that we forgot about. And there's also a huge number of people right now moving away from pharmaceutical, medical, industrial responses to things too. And so I think very quickly more and more people will tap into this. And then once you do, it becomes very absurd, like how the stigma applied to it, because it is so natural and it's such a part of who we are that it really becomes kind of maddening that this has been available to us all this time.
Yeah. Let's go into the legality of it. What does that look like, and how does it maybe vary from state to state? Or I don't know anything about that.
Yes, I'm happy to speak this massively. So this is another thing that I hear a lot from people in terms of misinformation. They come and they're like, isn't it legal? Because it's become like, it's so in the mainstream now that people just assume that it's legal sometimes, and it's not. So it's been very, very hard to predict, the path, because a lot of it is grassroots decriminalization movements. And so there's different cities and states in the country that are quote unquote decriminalized. Then there's others that are pursuing a legalization. So right now we're in the United States, we're in kind of like this hodgepodge situation where some states are in different, some states it's a misdemeanor, some states it's a felony, some states are completely decriminalized. So depending on where you are, no matter where you are, I always encourage people, it's a personal relationship with the medicine. So you really have to assess where you live, what is your level of risk, people who have children and are supporting families, are people who have licensed clinical degrees that would be at risk. Like everybody will have their own level of safety and comfort. Are you growing your own medicine? How are you working with the medicine? So most of the cultivators and medicine makers that I work with tend to work in the decriminalized parts of the country right now, but they are able and do provide countrywide. And then outside of the United States too, it's very much all over the place. There are some countries where it's been legal all along, and others are in the process of decriminalizing, like us.
Okay. How does that work as far as shipping then?
That is for the public facing sourcing companies. That is a risk that they take on. Many of them have worked within different frameworks. Like I said, they're working from decriminalized places. Others have adopted religious protections, which the United States from state to state varies. Some of the states have very strong religious protections. So if you are working with medicines as your spiritual sacrament, in some states there are protections under those laws as well.
Okay. When you said about the professions that have like a professional license, doctor, things like that, that makes me really sad, because I work with so many people that would fall inside that category, and they are a group of the most stressed, anxious, lack of time for their own well-being. And to have to sort of weigh that with it just seems really unfortunate because they could I mean, from everything that you're saying, I feel like those are the people, the healers and the traditional, Western medicine that could actually really benefit from this and then help with their healing.
Absolutely. Yes. I've had hundreds of clinicians, so psychotherapists, social workers, MFTs, doctors, nurses, lots and lots of nurses take my program and microdose in part because they need the support personally. Absolutely, to your point. And also they say they have so many patients and clients coming to them, asking them about this. They're like, I read about this, I'm curious about this, I'm drawn to do it. And so a lot of them took my program or in my community so that they could educate themselves. So even they're not microdosing support, they have people that they can call upon and refer to and understand who it would support and why.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's fantastic. Really, this sounds like it should be way more accessible than it is. I feel like I should know way more people. I don't know anybody that does this. And I like me in the arena that I've worked with people over the last decade plus, I feel like I should have more people like you in my circle and community. And I have zero. This is the first conversation I've had about this. And that is not okay. Like there needs to be more just options for people for healing themselves in non-traditional ways.
Yes. Yes. One of my favorite things, although I would not want to go through it again to get to today, but I had a huge in-person community in California for many years. I had healing art studios. We had 22,000 clients and a huge team and an in-person community. And that's so beautiful. But I'm so, so grateful that the turn of events led me to create something that's virtual and accessible to people all over the world, because there's so many people that exactly how you feel. They're like, I'm aware of this and I'm doing this and I'm benefiting from it, but I don't know anybody else in Alabama or Idaho or Iowa where I am. And so it enables people online to meet other kindred spirits and share information together. So that's one of the things I love about our new way of working and accessing each other and sharing our stories, because I think so much of, as the medical industrial complex starts to fall into further dysfunction, I think us connecting with each other and sharing practices and things that are effective together is the future of healing, truly.
How do you find, you mentioned a few states. I'm in Wisconsin. I've never, like I mentioned this, I'm running on the treadmill and I have a friend I work out with in the morning, and I told her that I was interviewing you and she was like, what? And she's in a sort of healing profession also. How do people, when they're doing this, how do they feel about sharing it with other people? Because I imagine there's probably some barriers there or just things that they have to deal with. So what does that look like?
Awesome question. I love this question. So once people start, it becomes quickly absurd that was ever illegal. So you can kind of forget about that. And you also, a lot of times people have such extreme relief from symptoms and healing that they've tried all these different things in their life and nothing has worked. And they do this thing and it works sometimes very quickly. You just want to share. You just really want to share. So there's like this enthusiasm that takes over people sometimes, and this, you become like this psychedelic evangelist and you just want to go tell everybody. And I always invite people, especially at the beginning, to hold your practice as sacred, because even if people aren't worrying about getting in trouble, to me, it can be just as disheartening if you have something so beautiful you're doing and you share it with somebody and they just kind of throw shade over it, right? And kind of throw a wet blanket on it. So I always encourage people to talk with people who are doing the practice with you. And so in community, we have programs that people meet weekly. We have programs that people meet monthly. And that way you can come together and be with a group of people who are supportive of you and really happy for you and supportive of growth. Because that's one of the things I hear from so many people. Like, they're the one in their family that's healing. Like they're the one that's like wants to break these patterns, that wants to live a different type of life, that doesn't want to drink alcohol, that doesn't want to smoke cigarettes. Like they don't want to do these things that are so ingrained. And it's sad, but a lot of times when people start to heal, people around you don't like you changing, right? And so there's a lot of friction. So it's really, really nice to have support who are not only sharing the practice that are safe and non-judgmental for you to talk to, but are actually like rooting you on and super psyched to see what you're becoming and what is possible for you. So yeah, I encourage safety and discernment.
Yeah. And I even work with so many people that they don't tell people they're working with me because they don't want them asking questions. They don't want to feel judged. They don't want sort of their newness, the new life that their new choices to be perceived, differently. They hold it very close sometimes. So it sounds very similar that way of just protecting your journey and then being so thoughtful about who you share it with. I want to make a group and I want us all to do this. It's just so wild to me that truly wild to me that this is the first conversation I'm having about this. And I wonder, maybe there are people, but I feel like I'm a person that people would be like, oh yeah, this is something that I am, that I'm trying. This is a path that I'm on. Like I'm pretty open to everything. And I'd be like, yes, take me with you on this path. But this is just so neat. So neat. Yeah. And inviting. Like it feels like an open door to a more, I think, aligned way of living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a beautiful, so many people that begin with microdosing that I start working with were like me, were for various reasons, they're afraid of losing control. They're like, I read about high dose psychedelic journeys and the benefits, but I want to stay here. I want to stay in control. I don't want to lose my mind. I don't want to damage my mind. And they have a lot of fear around it. But it's such a beautiful way to lay the foundation and have it be gentle and very subtle to start with and experience all the benefits and gifts, but also develop a relationship with nature again. And so many people who they would have never in a million years, like when they started microdosing, would have done a higher dose psychedelic journey, are now journeying a year later or 2 years later. And I was that way too. I microdosed for a long, long time before I'm a very cautious person. I like to learn all the things and experience all the things and take my time. But when I did, it was extremely profound, among the most profound healing experiences of my life. And I think by introducing people, most of the population, I think, will benefit by starting with microdosing and then building a relationship. So similar to, starting a meditation practice and then working your way up till you can do a 3-day retreat instead of just going into a 3-day retreat.
That'd be a little intense.
Very, very.
You had mentioned PTSD, trauma, things of that nature. If someone were to begin this journey, what does that look? I have several people in my world that have some pretty intense trauma. And I was actually driving a couple of days ago, kind of thinking about this and thinking about how their life sometimes is lived through the lens of this trauma and essentially how to keep myself safe. And that becomes so much of who they are wherever they are. What is the contrast like when they start this? How does that shift?
This question. This is such a powerful inquiry right now. We were just working on this last week. I have one of my microdosing immersions going on right now, and we were just diving into this deeply last week, in that so much of our therapy the last 40, 50 years has been focused on our trauma and what's wrong and our story, right? As we go in and we tell our story, our trauma over and over and over again. And so many people say, it gets me to a place where I intellectually understand my trauma and I I know it makes sense to me and my symptoms make sense to me, but I just can't get underneath it through talking about it. Right. And that is what mushroom practice does. It gets underneath the trauma to the feeling body that's deeper than our words, that's deeper than our mind. It's that part of us, our energetic body, our soul body, and it heals us at such a profound level that we can't get to any other way. And I think what people get tripped up sometimes because they'll start mushroom practice and they'll have such profound healing, through the practice, through their dreams, through their emotions, through a knowingness. And we're so wired to have to talk about things or to do things or to work hard through things or to suffer through things that I see a lot of people get tripped up into the process because it was too easy. It almost feels like too effortless, right? And so I do think we're in this shift of reimagining the way we heal. And instead of just staying in the story, our identities based around our trauma story is getting underneath, like, what is the emotion of the thing? What's the feeling of the thing versus staying in that story and identifier and starting to work with what is possible for us versus what is wrong with us.
Mm-hmm. Do they do, so someone with trauma, do they do they start microdosing? Is there any additional things that they do if that is specifically what they're coming to you for?
Yes, because there's such a variety and diversity of microdosing guides and coaches. Like in my group, we have a mastermind of us. We're all microdosing guides from all over the world. And so some are licensed therapists and psychotherapists. So that's nice. If someone is in kind of an acute, raw state, dealing with trauma, and would really benefit by having that dual support of someone who knows how to support microdosing, but someone who also has a therapeutic background, a talk therapy background, that might be well versed. I work with a lot of people who have done everything, who had a lot of trauma, often as a child, and they have gotten all the therapy. They've done the medications. They've done the cognitive behavioral stuff. They've done lots of trainings and lots of programs. And then they start microdosing, and it's like, that's the thing. Like nothing else they have done was able to get underneath and shift things energetically for them. And it's beautiful to witness because, exactly to your point, I see these people who lived an entire lifetime in reaction to their trauma or a traumatizing event. And when they can heal that, they can just be in their own being as they were meant to be, separate from what had happened to them, the story of what had happened to them. And then their life can kind of start as it was always meant to be. They can always be the person they were meant to be. And that's pretty incredible to witness.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking about the people that I care about and thinking how that could shift for them. And, wow, that's really neat. Okay. So I have some people who are very scientific and I want the research. I want all of these things. So what do you say? I am not that person. I am like, oh, I've talked to 5 people and they all are like, well, I feel good. My mind is good. I'm feeling my emotions. That is me. I don't want to read a study. No, thank you. I don't care. I will just be the guinea pig and I will figure it out. But now I have my people, your engineer people with growing in their mushroom room. Speak to those people. What do you say to them? Because I know that they are vastly different than any of the other questions I'm asking, probably.
I actually have, for healing artists and of all different backgrounds, I have on my website a free training that speaks exactly to this, because what we have to understand, like, everybody's going to come at this from a different angle and need different proof, right? For us, it's like hearing other people, kind of like old school ancient practice where our village did it and enough people do it and it's passed down in a lineage. We don't have that anymore. So now we have science. Science is our modern arbiter of proof and believability, for better or for worse, and authority. So a lot of people who are curious about this practice, need to see the research, need to see the science, need to know exactly what psilocybin is doing on the brain to understand the thing, which is very different than actually supporting people in the process. But I share this with a lot of guides that I work with, that it's good to know, even if you don't necessarily need science to approve nature, but if for people who need that, it's really nice to be able to speak that language and meet people on that level. So a perfect example, I have a lot of clients that I work with who are over 70 in New England and male. And they want to know the science. Like, they want to know what Harvard thinks. They want to know what other old white men think. And they need to know that before it's real, right? They're not going to take it from me. They're going to take it from somebody with a lot of letters behind their name who went to an Ivy League school. And that's fine, because that exists now, thankfully. So Michael Pollan's book was a game changer for that demographic. So Michael Pollan, the journalist, wrote a book called How to Change Your Mind, where he, is that generation and speaks that language, and talked about all of the academic research and proof, that we have now available to us. So there's lots. I mean, lots of times people are like, well, what's the research going on? It's impossible to keep track of it now. I mean, there's a new study in academic institutions every day in the United States right now. So the proof is amassing. Yes.
That's exciting.
And what's the shortcoming of it, I think, is that research and the pharmaceutical industry's drive for research is for curative, because ultimately they want to create something they can prescribe, right? So they do a lot of research on addiction or alcoholism or depression or anxiety. And so we miss a lot of the gifts, and we don't hear a lot about the gifts of microdosing, because there's a lot of things that can't be studied, that I think are the most valuable things about the practice. So a perfect example, like in my clients, my client, say my 80-year-old from Boston, like he might start because he read Michael Pollan's book, and he'll say, I notice my cognition declining rapidly. I forget everything. Like, I'm driving my kids crazy because I tell the same story over and over again. And that's why they come to practice. But then 6 months later, I talk to their family and their kids, and they're like, he's a completely different person. He's kinder. He's more patient. He says, I love you now for no reason. He is able to apologize when he's short with my mom. Like, that's never happened before. So to me, those things are impossible to research and quantify and do double-blind placebo studies on. But to me, like, that's the magic of the practice, are like these real world things.
Yeah. You mentioned cognition. Is there impact on dementia, things like that?
Yes. I mean, part of it is I'm like, leaping out to talk about what we have seen. But again, like, all of our work is what I've witnessed, right? And anecdotal. And so there's research studies going on, particularly with high dose psilocybin, that show remarkable, impact on brain health. But I've had so many cases, and guides that I have worked with who work with those populations specifically have seen, great improvements with dementia, Alzheimer's, any kind of like aging brain conditions. So I really, really love and think in the future, like, this practice is going to be a preventative practice. All the people I worked with during COVID, a lot of them put brain fog at the very, very tip top of their list. And they're like, I need my brain back. Like, my job requires me to be fully there. And my mind feels like a sieve now. And I just can't hold what I did. And they'll start microdosing and get their brain back.
Okay, last question, because the brain fog made me go here. I promise. What about perimenopause and menopause?
Oh, great question. I love this. So we have seen a lot of remarkable healing around women's reproductive health and hormones, just in general speaking. I've worked with a lot of women with PMDD and extreme forms of PMS. So much so they were not functional. They were like at 10% capacity for a good chunk of every month. And within one cycle of microdosing could no longer tell the difference between their cycles. It was
What's a
wild.
cycle? When you say a cycle, one cycle.
Like a lot of women that I worked with in PMDD, they were like, during my luteal phase, I can't, like, I'm asking for a divorce. I am fighting with everybody.
So do you mean when you say one cycle, you mean the
Yes.
menstrual cycle? Okay. I was thinking that was a
And so
dosing cycle.
They used to say, like, I am like Jekyll and Hyde, depending on where my menstrual cycle, where I am in my cycle. They, for the first time, are like, I'm the same person for the first time. Like, it brings me into balance. A lot of women really get into a regulated pattern with their periods that syncs with nature. So we joke about this on the calls all the time. So like syncing with the moon cycles, which is how we are when we're, in natural light, in the rhythm of the earth and nature, we sync up very naturally. So it tends to bring people back into balance. In terms of hormones, I've tended to see people who are on hormone support need less support after microdosing. So if they're on certain meds, maybe they still need that support, but they need less of it after microdosing. But in terms of all the symptoms around, I mean, as we know, there can be so many symptoms of perimenopause and menopause: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. So it's different for each woman, but absolutely. I think most importantly, and this is true for every physical condition, it really helps you connect with your body in a way that a lot of people say they've never had since they were a child. Like, we're much more aware of how we feel. And so it's a beautiful preventative because we know things before they happen, and we kind of trust ourselves again, that we know when something is off. It's less of a symptom, and it's more of kind of a symbol of what to look into. What's out of balance? Like, what's going on right now?
Yeah.
What's this trying to tell me?
Wow. Okay. Kind of putting a bow on this. Anything that you think maybe we didn't get to, or anything like that you want to make sure people who are listening understand or know or take away from this?
I think is to embrace curiosity. And at the same time, like, right now, there's so much information out there that it can be really, really overwhelming if you just try to do the research online. I think getting into, there's different psychedelic societies and microdosing communities that are popping up all over the place. And so just step into those communities and check it out and feel it out. I always invite people in my programs and community, like, even if you don't feel ready to do microdosing yet, you can feel free to join and just kind of be in the community and learn about it. And when you feel called and ready to begin the physical practice, you can. So just, don't be intimidated, feel invited, and know that this is something that we practiced for many, many, many centuries. It's very innate in us.
Yeah, I like that. Invited. And that's how, just having this conversation with you, it feels like an open door, like an invitation to just getting to know yourself and getting to actually be who you are out in life versus the version of us that we probably don't really want to be showing up as a lot of the time. Not speaking from experience or anything.
Conditioning. We've all been there.
Yes. Well, Kayse, this was, I feel like I could talk to you for a whole day and maybe a follow-up or something, because this is just really, I love this information. I am so thankful that you're here and sharing what you do and the impact of what you do, because I really think the listeners are going to hear this and be like, well, hot damn, how do I learn more about your community? So how we'll link it, but tell us a little bit more about your community.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. So my website, I have lots and lots of information. So for beginners, it's very much for you. And so it's at microdosingforhealing.com. There's a free workshop you can download there that's 80 minutes. And in it, I answer like every beginner question I get on the intake call. I tried to cover it for you, so you'll feel really, really confident that you kind of know what you're getting yourself into and what the options are for you. I also have a podcast on the subject too. So a lot of times people really enjoy hearing different backgrounds and approaches. So there's doctors, there's therapists, there's coaches, there's guides. I have psilocybin guides that have been working in the underground for many, many decades. So I invite you to check those out too. And then I also work with a lot of healing artists and coaches that want to start microdosing incorporating that into their existing practices too. So that information is available as well.
Okay. And what's the name of your podcast?
The Microdosing for Healing podcast.
Okay. Awesome. All right, Kayse, thank you. Thank you. I feel like that there's, and I'm sure that you have this experience where you meet with a member that you have or a person where you are different after that conversation. And I feel like this is one that I am changed after this conversation. And I truly think that after people listen, they're going to be having that same feeling. So I just want to thank you for who you are and for sharing your gift with people and sharing this message, because there's so much value here and so much opportunity for people to just really live their best life. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Spirit of a Badass is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Alecia Jacobson. Music by Shane Ivers. We'll be back with another inspiring interview. Until then, keep your spirits high and your energy badass.